For this video, I thought we would talk a little bit about selling a tenanted property, and joining me to discuss this is Russell Gould, CEO of Vesta, and Vesta is a platform where you can buy and sell tenanted properties and portfolios. And Russell, age-old conundrum for landlords. They want to sell their investment and they have to make a choice whether to sell it as vacant possession or sell it with a tenant in situ, and clearly there are pros and cons for either.
Yes. Historically, the traditional estate agent would ask you to serve notice on your tenants so that they can open up the sales process to the entire market, and in particular the owner-occupier market. Now the problem with that is, as we all know, not all sales go smoothly. And a lot of the sales will have long chains, and it could be a very long time that your property is without a tenant, which means you've lost income. Likewise, if you've had a great tenant for a long time, it's not a great thing to serve notice on them. So one of the things that Vesta is changing is all of our property. We have built Vesta specifically for the private rented sector, and one of the key aspects of what we're doing is all of our properties are sold with tenants in place. The idea being that if you sell a property, your tenant stays in the property throughout the sale process, which is great for the seller. It's great for the buyer because they effectively buy a property and have income from the day they purchase it. And what's really great is the tenant gets to stay in the property. So if you've had a great tenant, it's a way of kind of providing them with some respect when you're selling your property so that they can stay in situ. Indeed,
and just wanted to touch on the aspect of having a void when you're selling. Typical notice for a tenant is 2 months, but we know that in the UK a sale can take actually between 6 and 9 months in some cases, so you could be void for a very long time. When your property's void, then you're incurring additional costs like council tax and so on. And you know, I hear landlords say, oh well, I'll just agree for the tenant to stay in until the property's sold. But again, when a tenant gets spooked knowing that they're going to have to leave, and quite often if you say actually I'm going to sell, they'll want to leave pretty much straight away. And again, sales can fall out of bed, so even if you do get a sale confirmed, then I think 20% of sales in the UK fall out of bed and you're right back to square one again. So again, this is, to my mind, pushing people towards selling the property as tenanted.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And one of the other issues, well, tenants are humans. You know, we like certainty. We like to know where we're going to be. And if you tell a tenant that you are going to be selling your property, the first thing they're going to start doing, if you've served them notice or told them it's going to sell at some point but you're going to need to leave, is start looking for somewhere else. And as soon as they find another property, they will move on, because they know they don't have permanency where you are. Now the difference is Vesta is they do know that. We make it very clear to them that the property is being sold with the tenant in place, and the rental agreement will be married up with a landlord who's buying the property and is looking for a property with a tenant in place.
Absolutely.
The other thing a lot of landlords might not realise is the tenant doesn't have to let an estate agent come and visit the property and show loads and loads of people around. So you imagine a situation where you've had a number of viewings, the property's almost purchased and then falls over. The last thing a tenant wants to do is to open the doors again and keep the house tidy to the next wave of people. And so one of the things that we've done at Vesta is we will work with the tenant to undertake all the images that we need, the home buyer's report, the tenancy documentation, the floor plans, etc., and we'll present all of those on our website, meaning that in the vast majority of the cases the potential purchasers don't need to visit the property continually to make a decision to buy.
Now, I'm glad you touched on that because, as you rightly say, tenants are entitled to what's known as quiet enjoyment of their property. Even if it states in the tenancy agreement that they've got to allow viewings, it's very hard to enforce that. And out of respect for tenants, there may be many legitimate reasons why they don't want to allow viewings, such as being a shift worker, having a new baby, suffering from a bereavement. There could be any legitimate reasons why they don't want to allow viewings. But additionally, if the tenant's living in the property, if you're trying to sell it to somebody that wants to live there themselves, you know, it may not present as well as you might hope. But for an investment buyer, then they're not particularly concerned about that because the tenant is there and is happy living there. So again, this is pushing me towards your solution.
Yeah, and I think the other thing related, if the tenant knows the person who's coming to look at the property is effectively going to replace them and live in it, they won't go out of their way to tidy it and make it look great. Whereas if they know that it is another landlord that's going to buy it and they are going to be the tenant for that landlord, they will go out of their way to make sure the property is tidy. They will go out of the way to show show to that landlord that they're a great tenant. So it potentially increases the probability of you selling the property as well if you've got your tenant on side.
Yeah, and of course it's great for the incoming landlord to be able to start getting that relationship with the tenant. There may be a letting agency in place that can just continue with the management arrangement. So it's all very kind of smooth and seamless, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, very much so. And the good thing is because we've undertaken all the historic due diligence around that tenancy and the payment history, you know exactly what you're getting when you buy the property. So you know it's a good tenant, you know they've been paying their bills, you know what they've been paying, and you know exactly what to expect. There's no surprises when you've purchased the property.
Absolutely. I think the final point that I was going to bring up was that when you're selling a property, typically you're advised by the estate agent to give it a lick of paint, put some new carpets in, because that is what an owner-occupier will be looking for. However, if the tenant is already in situ, they're happy with the property, then from the landlord's perspective, there's no capital outlay to get the property ready for sale.
That's absolutely correct. And in fact, most tenants, if they know they can stay in the property for longer, will look after the property in a much better way, which means you don't need to, longer term, spend more on getting the property right and ready again, because it's been looked after properly.
Indeed. So just remind us, I'm a landlord, I want to sell a property or indeed a portfolio, because I can do that via Vesta. How would I go about doing that on Vesta?
You just need to visit the vestaproperty.com, click on the sale function and fill out your details, and we will work with you to manage the entire process. One thing that is very unique about us is we charge a fixed fee, so we don't charge commissions. For a single unit, we charge £900 including VAT to list your property, and that allows us to prepare all the due diligence documentation to help ensure a fast sale.
So I think it's one of those very rare occasions where there's what I call a triple win. The buyer wins, the seller wins, and actually the tenant wins as well, because they're allowed to remain in their home. So I think from that perspective as well, it's a great option to go and sell a tenanted property rather than trying to get the tenant to leave and go for vacant possession.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the other thing to note is this is a huge market. You know, that 20% of the UK's residential housing stock is rented. So to have a marketplace now that allows people to buy and sell properties with tenants in place, we think is a great thing for landlords, a great thing for potential buyers, for sellers, and obviously for tenants, because they get to stay in the property for much longer.
Fantastic. So there you go. There's a few of the things to consider if you are thinking of selling a tenanted property, and do go and look at vestaproperty.com and consider that option, because as we've been saying, really the big thing is that you will be earning rent up to the day of completion, so none of those dreaded voids to worry about, and of course your tenant can remain in situ and carry on living in the property. So Russell, great speaking to you. Thank you very much for joining me for this interview.
Thank you very much.